mentioned, I presume there are some attendees on the call today that are already involved in the plan, and that's great. So hopefully this is a nice refresher for you on the benefits of the plan. Maybe you'll learn some new things today. But for those that are not participating in the plan today, we'll go through what that looks like, and certainly happy to connect offline if you have additional questions about the retirement plan. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So hopefully everyone can see this. And we'll go ahead and jump right in. So as Ann mentioned, I'm with CAPTRSUT. We are a retirement plan advisory firm. I actually come out of our West Des Moines, Iowa office. So I imagine there are some Iowa organizations here on the call, but spend a lot of time in Nebraska as well. So certainly plenty of time on I-80 West, and really excited as of April to be working with NAM on the plan. So as a firm nationally, have a unique specialization in this, what we call multiple employer plan space. And that's what this is. So it's essentially a conglomeration of unrelated employers, all pooling their buying power together to create a really competitive plan. And so nationally, we work with the Coca-Cola Bottlers Association on a plan like this. We work with a National Auto Dealers Association on a plan like this, a National Engineering Consortium, and a lot of other nonprofits on plans like this as well. So hopefully bring some really unique expertise and specialization to this conversation. And to Ann's point, a plan that has really grown over the years, started back in 2009. So really helped to take a really great plan and hopefully continue to take it to the next level. So we'll get into a little bit of the benefits today. And like I said, certainly interrupt me at any point with any questions that you have. All right, so as we jump in, again, as I mentioned, I do have a quick agenda, but we can certainly deviate from this. But I'll give you a quick overview of what a multiple employer plan is and why some organizations join multiple employer plans. Talk about some of the unique benefits of the NAM 403B plan. I'll go through some detail on what you can customize if you decide to join the plan. So there are some kind of boilerplate features of this plan that everyone has to utilize, but there are also some opportunities for you to customize your design to meet your organization's needs, which is pretty cool. I'll talk about some other unique benefits just at a participant level for your employees if you join, and then just very briefly talk about what the next steps are if you're interested in learning more about the plan, considering potentially joining the plan, and certainly we'll talk about how you can go about connecting with me to have those conversations. I am just one half of our advisory relationship to the plan. So my colleague Andrew Shimp serves as co-advisor with me. We have an entire team of people behind us at CAPTRSUT that also support the relationship. So a lot of people working together for hopefully the benefit of your employees if you participate in this plan. So jumping forward, so as I mentioned, a multiple employer plan, and that's what the NAM plan is, again, is this a retirement plan that is maintained by two or more unrelated employers that are not members of the same controlled groups. That's a kind of an ownership term. And ultimately what it is a way for employers to consolidate their buying power and outsource risk so that they can focus on other areas of the organization. And certainly that is in a nonprofit world, that is hopefully music to your ears, but obviously we typically run pretty lean in the nonprofit space. And so there is this desire to, when we can, outsource some of that risk and responsibility while hopefully be able to access some benefits for our employees that are priced at a level that they would be if we were a much larger for-profit company. And so you've maybe experienced some of those other benefits already through NAM. There's a great EAP, there's some great health insurance options, a number of other great benefits that you're opting into that maybe would be difficult to get if you were operating on your own. And so really that's this is just an extension of some of those programs. And really to this day, the plan certainly operates now like a much larger for-profit entity plan. So there's over $50 million in this plan, over 2,000 participants in the plan, and over 100 participating member organizations. And I was actually on site yesterday at NAM and for a new member meeting. So I learned that there are 791 participating organizations now in NAM. So to me, that says, hey, this plan's great. It's grown to a really substantial level. There's a lot of opportunity out there for others to take advantage of the benefit that haven't taken advantage of it so far. So pretty cool opportunity. All right, so what are some of the unique benefits of the NAM plan, and why would organizations think about joining a retirement plan like the NAM multiple employer plan? Well, first and foremost, and this is directly from SHRM, but employees desire and expect retirement savings benefits. And that's true in the for-profit sector and in the nonprofit sector. In fact, there are more employees supported by a retirement plan in the nonprofit sector than there are in the for-profit sector. So the likelihood that you would be covered by a retirement plan if you're a nonprofit employee is higher than if you're a for-profit employer. And I think one of the main reasons is we as nonprofit entities are typically pretty altruistic, so we do care about our people. It may be difficult sometimes to remain ultra competitive from a compensation standpoint, but we tend to look at other benefits that we might be able to offer our employees to reward them for their service. And so pretty interesting in that, just looking at the last 3 to 4 years, what do employees continue to say are the most important benefits for them? What would cause them to stay at an organization or potentially leave an organization? And number one is always health-related benefits. And that's been the case for a long time. And certainly we understand why that would be. But number two has historically been retirement savings and retirement planning benefits. And kind of fascinating to look at this graph and just look at what the last couple of years told us about that. Certainly in 2020 and 2021, it took a back seat a little bit to leave benefits, to family care benefits, flexible work benefits. A lot of people were concerned about the pandemic. Additionally, obviously a lot of issue with finding childcare, and we've experienced that in my household. But as things have more normalized, retirement has taken its place again where it's been historically, which is the second most requested benefit behind health-related benefits for employees, and that's regardless of whether they're a for-profit employee or a nonprofit employee. So certainly, I think if you're not in a plan like this today, or have access to a plan like this, or offering a plan like this, I imagine you probably have people that work for you that would desire to have access to a retirement plan if they could. And kind of moving beyond that, so from an organizational level, an administrative level, why do some nonprofit organizations join multiple employer plans? And it's for something I've kind of came up with that I call the 6 C's. But it's number one is capacity. So maybe you recognize that you'd love to offer a benefit like this, but you don't have the capacity to manage it yourself. There's a lot of risk and liability that goes into managing a plan like this. There's a lot of work to oversee investments and negotiate with service providers. So maybe you just don't have the capacity to start your own plan, or maybe you have your own plan, it's just getting to be too much, and you're wondering if there's a better option out there. Number two is concerns over fiduciary liability. So retirement plans are very unique in that anyone who touches a plan and anyone who oversees a plan in a fiduciary capacity also takes on some personal risk for those functions. For most of us, we can there's insurance that our companies pay for that protect us from a lot of different things that we may do throughout the course of our job. But retirement plan governance is not one of those things. So there is always some personal risk at stake when you are managing a retirement plan and making decisions that impact the lives of people that work for you. And so a lot of people join plans like this because you can discharge almost all of that fiduciary liability to the entity. So to NAM in this case, and to CAPTRSUT, and to the ERISA attorney, to Nationwide, and to Benefit Plans Inc., because we're the ones running the plan, and you would just be a member of the plan. So you can discharge a lot of that liability. The next one would be cost savings and economies of scale. So in our industry, the more assets you get in a plan like this, the lower cost structure we can access from what we call the record keepers of the world. So in this case, for the NAM plan, it's a company called Nationwide, which you're probably familiar with, but they hold all of the money. They've got the website that an employee can access to check their balance. They have the mobile app that an employee can check. They're going to send out all the legal notices and statements. So in that case, the bigger this plan gets, the more leverage we have to negotiate lower costs for employees. And so there's a tremendous cost savings when you can be in a plan with $50 million and 2,000 participants, as opposed to a plan where maybe have 5 employees and a couple $100,000 in the plan so far. I mentioned a little bit about compliance and governance already, but that's a huge one. So the ability to not have to oversee a plan like this, to not have to meet with an advisor like myself quarterly to ensure that fees are competitive and investments are competitive, to not have to file an annual audit or a Department of Labor Form 5500, but to be able to discharge that to another organization. Connection to a greater pool of resources. So that might look like financial wellness and advice benefits, and I'll talk about that. But things that would maybe be really expensive and cost prohibitive if you had to access them on your own based on your size. And then lastly, I talked about this already, but competitiveness. We all know that there's a war on for talent nowadays, and it's really difficult to attract and retain people. And if the employee is expecting to have access to a retirement benefit as part of employment at your organization, if you don't offer that, is there some risk that that maybe that won't be the main reason they would leave, but that combined with other reasons may make other opportunities look more attractive. So again, we think there's a lot of reasons that organizations tell us that they consider plans like this, and we just wanted to highlight a few of those for you here today. And a couple interesting statistics that I found before we move forward. But the question we get a lot is, you're telling us that in general, most people have access to retirement plans and most employees care about having access to a retirement plan. But, delineate between for-profit versus not-for-profit. How does that compare? And interestingly, 4 out of 5 employees at nonprofit organizations participate in a workplace retirement plan when offered. So when it's offered, people are very interested in it. Over 2/3 of employees, so 68% of employees in the nonprofit sector, have access to an employer-sponsored defined contribution retirement plan. When we say defined contribution, that means the ability for me to put some money in from my paycheck into the plan, potentially to get a match from my employer. There are a lot of other plans for nonprofits that are defined benefit plans, a lot less popular now, but pension plans. But again, as I mentioned, there are more workers on a percentage basis in nonprofit organizations that have access to retirement plans than there are in for-profit organizations. So certainly, again, this has been something that the nonprofit world has identified as being important, probably even better than the for-profit world has. And then I think the other question we sometimes get is, well, how does that compare by employer size? Because we know there are a lot of big nonprofits out there, right? There are big healthcare systems that are considered to be nonprofits. Of course, they're going to have a retirement plan. And interestingly, only 36% of employees that are employed by a nonprofit that has less than 50 employees don't have access to a retirement plan. So 64% of employees that are employed by an organization with less than 50 employees have access to a workplace retirement plan. So again, the numbers aren't all that different depending on the size of your nonprofit. A vast majority of nonprofits have made access to a retirement plan an important thing. Now, I will say that the fact that 1/3 of your peers aren't offering access to a workplace retirement plan, I think is a great opportunity for you as an organization if you're not offering that access to, again, just even more fully kind of sweeten the pot for your employees and create an environment where, in this competitive marketplace, you are adding a benefit that maybe 1/3 of your competition is not offering. A lot of detail here, and I won't get into this for the sake of time, but on just some of the benefits of the plan. Again, as I mentioned, biggest thing, ability to outsource risk, the ability to save time and not having a managed plan like this, and ability to offer a plan to employees that may not otherwise have a great opportunity to save elsewhere. All right, so a couple quick items to touch on regarding the customization of the plan. So we get this question a lot. I do a lot of meetings with organizations that are interested in joining the plan, and they want to know what they can customize. So the great news is there's a lot that you can customize because we know that each individual organization has a different financial situation. So you can customize your eligibility. So you can determine who's going to be eligible for the plan and when. You can determine if they need to wait a certain amount of time to get into the plan. You can determine if you'd like to make some sort of match or contribution on behalf of your employees into the plan, but you don't have to. There are organizations that just allow employees to put their own money in the plan, but don't necessarily make a contribution. So you have some flexibility there. You could also make what's called discretionary contributions only, where you say, hey, we'd like the opportunity to be able to make a contribution in the plan, We also like the option to not have to do it if we don't have a good year financially. So you could do that as well. And a lot of organizations will do that. You can customize how often employees are allowed to enter the plan. So you may say, hey, we're a small organization. Administratively, we don't want to be allowing employees to constantly make changes. And then we potentially miss something. Maybe someone decides to stop participating or they change the rate that they're participating. Good news is you can customize that. And so I typically coach interested organizations on, hey, let's come up with a reasonable entry date that's not going to cause administrative burden to your payroll or your HR team to get people into the plan. You can also change how frequently people can make contribution changes. So you can limit that, again, from an administrative standpoint. You can implement a vesting schedule. So you can say, hey, we're going to make some sort of contribution on behalf of the employee, but we want to make them stay at the organization for a while to get it. And so we're going to put some sort of vesting schedule in place. And then you can also determine whether or not the plan offers loans. So some organizations that participate allow loans from the plan. Others do not. And so that's typically a philosophical decision. And I like to help employers kind of think through that when they're determining whether or not to offer loans. So a lot of great opportunities to customize the plan to the needs of your employees and your organization if you'd like to. But then beyond that, I think there's a lot of benefit from the non-customized features, the standard features. So there is one investment lineup. There is a committee of executives at NAM that work with CAPTRSUT and Nationwide and Benefit Plans, Inc. to vet the plan. So we get together every quarter. At CAPTRSUT, we're looking at the investment lineup every day, but we're picking a highly competitive investment lineup that is very low cost. And we are doing all the research and all the vetting on that lineup before it gets made available to you and to your employees. And so there is no liability on your end for the selection of those investments. That has been outsourced to the committee, to NAM, and to CAPTRSUT. We're a fiduciary advisor on the plan. So we sign on as a co-fiduciary, which means if we do something and we're in trouble, or excuse me, if the plan is in trouble, then we're in trouble. So we have a vested interest in helping this plan to be ultra competitive, for fees to be reasonable, and for it to be a great benefit for your employees. There is one fiduciary liability insurance policy that covers the entire plan, and that is paid by NAM. So you don't have to pay that. Again, that's handled at the plan level. There are one set of service providers for the plans. As I mentioned, Nationwide is the record keeper. Benefit Plans, Inc. is the third-party administrator. You don't have to have your own relationships with different service providers. Again, that's all outsourced at the plan level. We also have standardized distribution options for folks when they want to take money out of the plan. So as I mentioned, loans is an option. However, we have a financial hardship provision that is not optional, but an employee would have to self-certify that they qualify to take a financial hardship. So they do have access to getting their money out of the plan if they need to. The plan has pre-tax and Roth contributions available, which are a great benefit. So those typically are unique to the individual participant in terms of what makes more sense for them, but the fact that you offer both is great. And then, of course, I think the one item that is typically music to the ears of the HR folks on the team and on the call is the fact that there's just that one annual audit and that one Department of Labor Form 5500 filing. And if you're in an organization that sponsors your own plan, or you've worked at an organization in the past that sponsors their own plan and you've had involvement with that, you know that can be a kind of an arduous process. And so it's really nice to be able to, again, outsource that to NAM and have that all taken care of at the plan level. And of course, expenses are really important. So if I'm a highly analytical person, so if I'm sitting on the call today, I say, well, I want to understand how the expenses work. So this is maybe a little bit more detailed than most people would want, but I do like to kind of lay this out for folks when they're considering whether a plan like this makes sense for them. As Ann mentioned, a tremendous benefit of this plan is how ultra low cost it is for the employer. So there is a maximum employer cost of $100 per active participant per year. And that's all based on the structure of the organization. So if you have 10 or less employees, it's $100 per active participant annually. If you have more than 10, then the structure actually even continues to decrease. So there's some kind of buying power and economies of scale there. But at a maximum, the most you'll pay as an employer is $100 per active participant for the year. Now, most of the fees are paid by the employee, which is really typical of any retirement plan, whether it's for-profit or not-for-profit organization. Of course, if I pick my investments There's costs associated with Fidelity or T. Rowe Price or TIA CREF, whatever manager in the plan I select. There's obviously going to be costs associated with that entity buying and selling stocks, for example, investing my money. So the average participant pays about 10 basis points, about 1/10 of 1% for investment expense. Tacked on to that is the record keeping and administration fee. So as I mentioned, that would be Nationwide Benefit Plans Inc. That's about 1/4 of 1% a year. There's the CAPTRSUT advice and wellness fee, as well as the advisory services to the plan. So that's an even lower number there. And then the average person participates in about 3 basis points or 0.03 in the annual audit. So again, ultra low cost, both for the employer and the participant. In fact, there's a resource called the 401k Averages book that looks at retirement plans as a whole in this country and identifies what the average participant pays in a retirement plan. This plan is right at $50 million. So it's pretty easy for us to benchmark the cost of this plan. Based on that 401k Averages book, the average participant in a $50 million plan pays 91 basis points, or about 0.9%. In this plan, it's 54. So almost half of what the average participant pays. And that's for profit or not for profit. So again, really, really competitive plan, a pretty great option for an employee, especially when you consider that if you had to fund a plan like this on your own and you only had a couple participants, you're probably paying well north of 1 or 2% just an administrative cost for that. So this is significantly lower. And then NAM, again, handles a lot of the legwork on overseeing the plan. So again, there's an executive committee that oversees this plan. NAM handles the fiduciary liability insurance policy on the plan. And then one of the things we're transitioning soon is the Fidelity bond for the plan, where that will be handled at the plan level as well. And it's to be determined how that will be structured from a fee standpoint, but it'll be a low cost benefit one way or the other. So again, pretty excellent that you can offer such a large plan, a robust plan, a great benefit for employees with very little cost to you as a member organization. I'll stop and pause there really quick. I just have a couple more things to cover, but I know that's a very detailed slide. So are there any questions that anyone has before we move off of that point?
I have 2 questions in the chat.
Sure.
One question is, how is a 403B different than a 401k?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is there is not a significant difference anymore. So there used to be a much more significant difference. 403B plans in the past used to be what you call an annuity contract. So structured very differently. The rules between 401k and 403B were very different in terms of how much money an employee could put in, how much match an employer could put in. Today, the rules are very, very similar. There are a few things from a 403B standpoint that we're excited to hopefully kind of align with 401k plans in the near future. One would be, and I'm really getting in the weeds here, but what's called a collective investment trust investment vehicle. So a lot of 401k plans today offer what's called collective investment trusts. They're a little bit more low cost target date fund vehicles. But the vehicle we have in the plan is very low cost here. We expect very soon that 403B plans will be allowed to offer collective investment trust. But the other difference, years ago, 403B plans did not have to have an audit and an annual Department of Labor Form 5500 filing, but that is not the case anymore. So today there is really, from a participant's perspective and from an employer's perspective, very, very little difference. It's just that 401k plans are for for-profit entities, 403B plans typically for nonprofit entities. Now there are some nonprofits that offer 401k plans today, given that there is not a whole lot of difference anymore. But yeah, that's a great question. 10 years ago, there have been a lot of differences. The goal has really been to make 403Bs look a lot more like 401ks.
Another question in the chat. How has the Secure Act impacted 403Bs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we would tell you the biggest impact of the Secure Act is something that actually got postponed, which is kind of nice. So there was a requirement that that all catch-up contributions be made in Roth form for highly compensated employees. And that's going to be a really select group at a lot of different nonprofits. But the requirement was that anybody that made more than $145,000 in 2023, if they use the age 50 plus catch up starting in 2024, is going to have to do that in Roth form. That got kicked down the road to 2026. So really the biggest impact right now is some things that actually are not available yet and are optional for plans like this. So, there are 96 provisions in the Secure Act 2.0, and a vast majority of them are optional. Now, the mandatory ones are an increase in the required minimum distribution age. So if someone keeps their money in a retirement plan, now it's age 73 before they have to start taking money out. Obviously, most people will take money out before then, but some people have other buckets of money and they want to delay taking money out. So that continues to get delayed as people live longer. But I would tell you the biggest provisions that are getting the most conversation, but very little to no adoption yet, because most of the record keepers, the nationwides of the world, aren't ready to handle them yet, are different provisions around student loan repayment. So there is an optional provision that would allow an employer to make an employer match into the retirement plan on behalf of an employee that is repaying student loans but can't afford to contribute to the plan because they're repaying student loans. So essentially they would self-certify that, hey, I'm paying $300 a month in student loan repayments. Here's my paperwork. See, that equates to 8% of my salary. And say you make a match of 50% of the first 8% someone puts into the plan, they would get matched. Well, they'd be able to say, okay, well, you're putting in 8% of your salary into your student loan repayment. We'll go ahead and make that match into the plan on your behalf. Again, that's an optional provision that may have some interest. It's going to be difficult to administer for a lot of organizations, so we haven't seen a whole lot of interest there yet. Another one is around emergency savings. So I think we all probably have experiences with our organizations. This is true whether you're a for-profit or a not-for-profit entity. Unfortunately, the vast majority of Americans are not very good at budgeting and saving, and a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. And so the industry as a whole is trying to solve for that. I'm not convinced that the retirement plan is the best place for that. I think, kind of those emergency savings needs are maybe better served elsewhere, as opposed to kind of robbing from your retirement plan account. But there are some optional provisions within Secure 2.0 that would allow employees to withdraw money from their retirement plan account in kind of these special sidecar emergency savings accounts. So it wouldn't be a loan, it wouldn't be a hardship, but it would be a special kind of emergency savings account. And we've talked about this as a committee at NAM. Again, these are very new provisions where, it's not just nationwide, but the Fidelities, the Vanguards, the Principals of the world, they're all trying to figure out how they're going to accommodate these provisions. And so I know that we'll have a lot more conversations about it going forward as it becomes clear to us whether or not that's a viable thing to add to the plan. But a vast majority of the provisions, just to kind of put a bow on the secure conversation, a vast majority of them are optional. And some of the ones that are mandatory are further down the road. So there are very few mandatory provisions that took place this year. One being the option to self-certify a hardship, for example. But a lot of them are going to be kind of more 25, 26, 27, even into 2033 is when the last provision takes effect. So certainly, a great question. Really impressed that whoever it is that asked that is familiar with Secure 2.0, but certainly something we'll be talking about a lot as a committee going forward.
That came from one of our members who's an attorney, I think. So she's
very
very
impressive.
knowledgeable about such
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
Before I go on to the next question, you mentioned the student loan provision. I need to give a plug. If your organization for your team is not encouraging them to participate in the public student loan forgiveness program, you should. And Hannah on the NAM team can get you all the information you need on that. Last question I see so far in the chat is, how difficult would it be to transition from a SEPRA to the 403B?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's typically pretty easy. So one of the benefits of the plan is that I mentioned Benefit Plans, Inc. They're a third-party administrator out of Omaha. They are great at assisting entities with transitioning into a plan like this. It's pretty easy to move from a SEP IRA into a retirement plan like this. There are obviously notices that are required for that conversion. There is what's called a blackout period, so a minimal amount of time where the assets would have to be outside of the market or outside of at least the ability to make changes on those investments while they transition from that current IRA provider to nationwide. But certainly, be happy to kind of connect and walk through that further. And we can even have Benefit Plans Inc. walk us through exactly what that looks like. They have a really handy timeline that they've created to help organizations that are transitioning from one plan into this plan to really understand kind of what that first 90 days look like. For an organization that is not moving another plan into this plan, it's a pretty quick and easy process to get set up and going. But a little bit more goes into that transition, but it's a pretty simple transition.
That's all the questions I see in the chat, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or send it to me directly, whatever you prefer.
Perfect. I'll touch on a couple last items here, and then maybe we'll just open it up for any other questions that trickle in between now and maybe the next 5 minutes. So just lastly, what are some of the unique benefits to participants in a plan like this? Certainly can't speak for Ann and for NAM, but I think one of the benefits to maybe why a change was made to CAPTRSUT as the plans continue to grow, to provide more unique benefits to the individual employee that would maybe not be accessible elsewhere. One of the cool things we do offer at CAPTRSUT, and it's included in this plan within the fees that I already discussed, so there's no additional cost to it, is access to financial advice on demand for any employee that is that works at an organization that participates in this plan. So CAPTRSUT has about 3,000 retirement plans across the country. We have invested heavily in building a what we call our advice desk. It's really just a call center of retirement counselors that give fiduciary advice to participants in our retirement plans. So we have a 1-800 number. We have a website called CAPTRSUTadvice.com that is just a dedicated participant website where someone could call the 1-800 number or schedule an appointment on that website, and they can reach out to CAPTRSUT for any financial related question. So certainly it could be about the retirement plan, but they could reach out and say, hey, I'm considering buying versus leasing a car. Can you talk me through what I should be thinking about? Or, I'm considering buying a house. This is how much the house costs. This is how much I'm going to put down. This is what my payment looks like. Do you think that makes sense? And they kind of help talk through that. They'll help talk through budgeting or student loan consolidation. So all these different things that an employee could get access to advice on demand, no additional cost. And we have no services that we could even sell that person. If they may say, well, hey, I want to talk to you about life insurance. Okay, we'll talk to you about life insurance, but we can't sell it to you. And so, you maybe need to go find someone to do that. So pretty cool, pretty unique benefit that, again, as an employee that participates in the plan, they have unlimited access to that advice and that wellness. As part of that, any employer that gives us email addresses for their employees, once a quarter, we're going to send a really quick, professionally done market update video from our chief investment officer. It's delivered at an 8th grade education level. So, again, I think markets can be intimidating sometimes. The economy can be intimidating. So we present this quick 3-minute video in a really easy to understand way. We also have a quarterly topical webinar. We have a quarterly topical email. So it might be on an item, like I mentioned, understanding Social Security or buying versus leasing a car. So all these different ways that we're going to provide resources to your employees if you join the plan. And it's really our way to hopefully, again, reinforce just your overall benefits package and the things that you're making available to your employees. All right, so very last thing to cover here. Again, next steps, if you're not in the plan today and you're interested in joining the 403B plan, would be more than happy to connect with you and go a little bit more in detail on some of these items, maybe walk through what we call the participation agreement. So that's that option to customize your design. So your vesting schedule, your employer contribution. The question that came through about the SEP IRA, one of the things you'd want to do is understand, maybe connect with that current provider and say, hey, we're considering joining this plan. Help us understand what it would entail to kind of unwind from that situation and map those assets into the NAM retirement plan. So again, if applicable, you'd certainly want to have those conversations at some point. And then again, the beautiful thing here is that we have a third-party administrator called Benefit Plans Inc. that really will hold your hand for all of the remaining tasks. And they're going to do a lot of it for you. And they're going to produce that timeline and really walk you through step by step, getting into the plan and really make it really easy. So my shameless plug would be that, it's a great plan. It's a tremendous benefit to be able to offer a retirement plan that really functions, again, like a much larger corporation's retirement plan, but to be able to offer it at a level that, it could be accessed by organizations that have as little as 1 or 2 employees, and be able to offer that buying power and those resources is a really powerful thing. So really appreciate everyone's time today. Like I said, I'm happy to pause now and see if there are any more questions, but certainly I'll leave my contact information up here on the screen if anyone wants to reach out to me directly.
And we have had a couple people wondering if we could get copies of the slides. Can you send those to Aaron?
Yep.
We also recorded this, so watch for an email from Aaron with the slides and the recording. They're pretty excited about that. And then I also just want to be, I don't know why I'm echoing. I hope that's not, you're not hearing that. But anyway, the NAM Retirement Committee took a long time, 1.5 years, to go through the process to see what could be offered, went out to bid, talked to folks. We have seen over the last 10 to 12 years, the regulations have changed so much and are increasing for 403Bs that we thought it just made sense to move to somebody that this is what they do and pay for their expertise. So we're really, our job is to make your jobs easier. So this is just one of the ways that we hope to do that. And we do have time for just another question or two if anybody wants to jump in.
Can I ask a quick clarification on the $100? Is that like an enrollment thing, or how often do you pay that $100?
Yes, I believe
per
it's
employee?
assessed quarterly. And that's where how most retirement plans will assess fees. So if you had an employee that joined the plan, and let's just say let's just say your organization has offered the plan historically, you hire a brand new employee, they jump in the plan on October 1st. I believe Benefit Plans Inc. just assesses that fee quarterly. I presume they probably send some sort of invoice. I'll get clarity on that, but I presume they probably just send an invoice to the organization quarterly, where if that employee were to, let's just say, leave the organization on January 1st, then you're not going to pay $100 for the full year for that individual. It's just going to be for that time period that they were actually an employee and actually participating in the plan as an active employee.
But it's annual.
Correct.
Once a year.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
then maybe you just answered this by your language, but if you have employees who are no longer active with you, but they still have money in your plan, how do you handle those people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will clarify how that $100 works on that. So let me check into that and I'll respond back. But for the other expenses, so they certainly can keep their money in the plan if they want to, and they'll continue to pay their other expenses. So their money can remain invested. They can make investment changes. So there will be expenses that continue to get taken out of that. Within that, the other administrative expenses are paid as well. So, for example, the nationwide record keeping fee. Typically, the way the laws work and the way this plan works is, if someone leaves and terminates employment and they leave the organization with less than $1,000, by design, they'll get a notice from Nationwide that'll tell them that they have a certain amount of time to roll the money out of the plan. If they don't, then they'll just receive a check for those funds. And then if someone has a balance between $1,000 and $5,000, they'll get that same notice. But if they don't roll their money out within a certain amount of time, then that'll be rolled into an IRA in their name. And really, it's not a NAM rule, it's an IRS rule, but it's a way to kind of keep small balances cleaned up in plans like this, because there is responsibility at a plan level for us to keep account of people. Even if they left the organization, they've left their money there, it's still our responsibility to keep track of those people. So there are some ways to kind of keep those smaller balances cleaned up. But anybody that keeps their money in the plan, they'll continue to pay just the fees for the services that they're accessing, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Great questions.
Had
a lot of great questions today. I'm impressed. Any other questions for me?
Although I can find it for the week after that.
I don't think I heard that one. Was that?
I don't
Tara?
think that was for us. I think that was.
Oh, okay.
Oops.
Sounds good.
Well,
All right.
I'm going to stop recording now.